This first video, I'm going to kind of outline the immunity that we have to various pathogens, to either bacteria or viruses, all right? So I'm going to start here with the host. This is going to be you, all right? And in terms of our immunity, we kind of have two branches that I'm going to start with, all right? First branch that you're going to have is going to be your innate immune system, all right? This is going to be the immunity that you're born with. You have this from day one, all right? But in terms of your innate immune system, it's a non-specific type of defense, meaning anything that looks potentially foreign to this part of your immune system, it's going to target it and destroy it, okay? Our second branch is going to be our acquired immunity, okay? And in terms of our acquired immunity, this is very specific, okay? So acquired immunity you gain over your lifespan as you are exposed to various bacteria. Your immune system will make cells to recognize that bacteria again so that you don't get sick or you don't get as sick, okay? Your acquired immune system, this is also where vaccines are going to come into play, okay? Essentially what we're doing with vaccines are exposing the body to a particular pathogen, whether it be bacterial or viral, and allowing your immune system to mount a defense to it, okay? So you're exposing the person not to the actual disease, but to some of the proteins like the virulence factors that we talked about in chapter 15, so that your immune system can recognize those virulence factors and say, hey, those are bad news. We need to target anything that has those, okay? So in terms of the acquired immunity, this is going to be chapter 17 in your book. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about the acquired right now, and we'll go into more detail a bit later. Chapter 16 is going to really focus on the innate type of defenses. With our innate defense, we have then our first line of defense and our second line of defense. All right? Our first line of defense are going to be really physical things that are associated with the body. All right? So, for example, your skin is one of the first lines of defense in your innate immunity. That epithelial covering that we've got on the outside of us protects bacteria from getting to other organs within our body. So physical barriers like the skin. There are also chemical barriers. Things like the pH of your sweat. Sweat's a little bit acidic. Most bacteria that are pathogenic want to survive in an environment that's closer to neutral. So if your skin is a little bit acidic, that's going to help fend off potential invading pathogens, okay? And then in terms of that, you've got a genetic component. And in terms of the genetic component with your immune response, these are essentially the genes that you're born with that you received from your mom and your dad that are going to come into play more when we talk about chapter 17, okay? So in terms of our first line of defense, we're talking about physical, chemical barriers really, and the DNA that you have within your cells, because some of your immunity is going to come from what you inherited from your mom and dad, all right? Second line of defense is going to involve some of the immune system, okay? So The inflammatory response is going to be one of the second lines of defense that we're going to discuss, and I want you to really understand the inflammatory response, because where that's going to help you is when you go to take patho, you need to know the inflammatory response, because we're going to go into a lot more detail when you take patho about inflammation and its role in fighting disease. We'll talk about interferons. Interferons are proteins that are made by your immune system that attack certain molecules. Okay? We'll talk more in detail. Oh, I spelled that totally wrong. Interfere. We'll just switch that around. Interferons. Okay? The ability of cells to phagocytose material is going to be your second line of defense. So in terms of that, things like your neutrophils are going to be important in identifying and engulfing foreign particles, taking them out of the system. And in terms of that, there's going to be a component of phagocytosis that's going to be necessary to activate part of our acquired immune system. So while I'm kind of segregating these out into first line of defense, second line of defense, innate and acquired, I want you to know that there's going to be some interaction between your innate and your acquired system, okay? They don't function completely independent of one another, all right? And where you're going to see some of that interaction that we'll talk about later this section is going to be with phagocytosis. Not so much with the neutrophils, but it's going to be the macrophages that are going to become important in that particular process, all right? Last part of your second line of defense is going to be activation of complement, okay? This is not complement like, oh goodness, geez, I like your sweater, that's really pretty. Complement is part of your immune response, and essentially what that complement does is it latches on using antibodies that are produced as part of your acquired immune system. This is again going to be where you'll see an interaction between acquired and innate with the activation of complement. So those antibodies then are going to tell proteins that circulate within your bloodstream, hey, we need to take that out. We're going to essentially assemble pores that we're going to insert into that bacteria. If you insert a pore into that bacteria, interior contents are going to leak out, cell's going to die, okay? Basically with complement, okay? So that's going to be another one that will interact with our acquired immune system, okay? So I've got first line of defense, I've got second line of defense. Really what we've got here with our acquired immunity, I like to classify this as the third line of defense, okay? And in terms of the third line of defense here, this is going to be very, very specific as far as acquired. You are going to have, let me fix that spelling error. There we go. I can spell things like phagocytosis no problem, but natural never happens. Okay? So you're going to have acquired immunity that you're going to acquire naturally, and you're going to have acquired immunity that's going to happen artificially. Okay? Now, in terms of that, when we're talking about a natural infection, or when you acquire immunity naturally, typically we're talking about infection with whatever the pathogen is. You can establish natural acquired immunity to something like measles if you have measles and you survive. Your immune system is going to make the antibodies necessary to recognize that virus again, so that if you're exposed to the measles virus again, you're not going to get sick, okay? I like using the measles virus because this is one also that has a vaccine. And this is where that's going to come into play with our acquired immunity, okay? So essentially with vaccines, we expose our bodies to part of that measles virus so that our immune system makes the antibodies. So if we see it again, our immune system is already primed to recognize that disease and take it out, okay? So in terms of that, we've got natural, we've got artificial. You can get it via infection. You can also get some natural immunity passively. That passive natural immunity is going to be from mom's breast milk, okay? So when you hear about breastfeeding being beneficial for the infant, this is where that comes into play, all right? You're going to pass on to your child some passive immunity. So antibodies that your body has made will be passed on to your child. But keep in mind, this is kind of temporary. So it's just to kind of get the infant through the first couple months until the immune system is able to respond and make antigens on its own, all right? So in terms of that, we've got natural, we've got artificial. In terms of that, the artificial isn't necessarily a bad way to acquire immunity. There's not a benefit from natural acquired immunity over artificial immunity, okay? There are some people who think, well, if you get exposed to something naturally, that's going to be better for your immune system. Not necessarily. Vaccines are very, very effective. And in terms of that, the benefit of the vaccine is you as a parent don't have to deal with the sick child now, okay? And that's got to be worth something, because if you could not have your child be sick, I would think that that would be a big benefit, okay? So in terms of that, this is kind of how the immune system portions out. The first part that we're going to talk about with chapter 16, we're going to talk about the innate immune system, okay? So we'll focus first on the first line of defense. Then in terms of that, the second line of defense, I'm going to talk individually about inflammation, about interferons, phagocytosis, and complement, okay? Chapter 17, we're going to talk more about acquired immunity, and I'm going to put together a special or an additional video on vaccines, because I think as future healthcare providers, this is one way that you can help people understand what's going on with vaccinations and that they don't need to be scared of vaccinations, okay? So in terms of that, we'll do that with chapter 16. If you have any questions, please let me know.